This woman's murder is one of the most infamous cases in the UK. She was beaten and kicked to death because she was a goth. I'm True Crime Caitlyn, and this is the murder of Sophie Lancaster. Sophie was born on the 26th of November 1986 and lived in Lancashire. Sophie was someone who really stood out within her local community. She was a part of the gothic culture and she would dress alternatively. She had tattoos, piercings, she wore bright, beautiful colours in her hair, she wore bold makeup, dark clothes and sported tunnels in her ears. Her friends would describe her as fiery and feisty, but also kind and sensitive. She was also really intelligent. She had a place at university where she was about to go to study English. She enjoyed spending time with her friends, going out, having some drinks together, or just chilling and listening to music. Sophie was in a relationship with a man named Robert Maltby. The couple had met through mutual friends and soon they started spending every day together and got into a relationship. On the 11th of August 2007, Sophie and Rob were walking through Stubby Lee Park in Backup when they would be pounced on by a group of teenage thugs. The teenagers began hurling abuse at Sophie and Rob and they just tried to ignore it up until one of the boys went over and out of nowhere, completely unprovoked, punched Rob. Rob tried to just brush it off and ignore it, tried to walk away, but the gang wasn't going to let him. The teens pounced on Rob and began to beat him, kicking him, punching him so viciously that he fell unconscious. Meanwhile, Sophie is pleading with the gang to just stop, please just stop hurting him, while she is cradling his head, trying to protect him. And that is when the gang turned on her. Sophie was barbarically beaten. She was stamped on with so much force that shoe imprints were left on her face, and she was repeatedly kicked in the head. Two of the teenagers were stood on either side of Sophie and they are both kicking each side of her head like it is a football, tearing out some of her hair in the process. They did this until she too fell unconscious and Sophie and Rob were covered in blood. There was actually so much blood that you couldn't tell where it was coming from, which injury was bleeding. The attackers were with a larger group of children and after committing this horrifying beating, they all ran away, separating from each other. Some of them would gloat to other people that they met that night what they had done. One of them said, quote, "There's two moshers nearly dead up Backup Park. You want to see them. They're a right mess." Some of the other children who witnessed the horrific beating would call emergency services. When paramedics arrived, they couldn't initially tell who was Sophie and who was Rob. That is how catastrophic their injuries were. The couple both fell into comas. Rob would eventually come out of his coma and he suffered from memory loss. He couldn't recollect parts of the attack. He would go on to make a full physical recovery, however he struggled for years mentally and emotionally. 13 days after the attack, Sophie's family were forced to make one of the biggest and most difficult decisions of their life. They decided to turn off Sophie's life support machine. Sophie Lancaster would die from her injuries in the hospital and she was only 20 years old. In April 2008, 16-year-old Ryan Herbert was convicted of the murder of Sophie Lancaster. For this, he received a sentence of 16 years and 3 months in prison. This was later reduced by 9 months on appeal, and he was released in 2022 after making significant progress in prison. 15-year-old Brendan Harris was also convicted of Sophie's murder. He received a sentence of 18 years imprisonment, and as of December last year, he is eligible to apply for parole. 3 other young boys were convicted for their part in the attack of Rob, and each of those received sentences of between 4 to 5 years, meaning that all of them will be free now.